Daniel, you dropped an insane video of a secret meeting that took place in Germany a few weeks ago as they were selling their Bitcoin. Hands down, one of the funniest things that I've seen all year. Firstly, how did you get in and out of that meeting alive, and why did you even film it in the first place?
So it wasn't actually me who filmed it. It was someone there sent it to me, and yeah, I just had to share it with the world.
Ich war nie auf einer Akademie. Und doch habe ich allein auf mich gestellt. Ganz Europa erobert.
They did a good job. Are they still safe now? Obviously, that video went absolutely viral, 800,000 plus views. What's that feedback been like since it's seen the light of day and it has been leaked?
Yeah, the mole is still there. There's Bitcoiners everywhere. In some positions, you have to keep quiet about your Bitcoin interests. But yeah, no, the feedback was incredible. I was very happy that people found it hilarious. There's few things better than having like a good old laugh, and everyone loves a meme. I love memes, so it was great to create a meme that made other people laugh. That felt really good.
The timing for it to be released, just as Germany's sort of getting to the end of selling their bag, and they've pretty much set the recent low, I guess, of the cycle, and it's pumped a lot since then, about 10 grand. Since the weekend time of filming with what happened with Trump there. Obviously, they're forced to sell that Bitcoin. They didn't have a choice unless they were to change the laws. But like we see El Salvador's gone onto a Bitcoin stand. We do see President Trump talking about adopting Bitcoin, either making it legal tender or a treasury reserve asset. What do you think that conversation within Germany's like at the moment? I understand that they were forced to sell it, but do you think they're talking about, hey, we need to add Bitcoin onto the balance sheet?
It's so hard to tell. I think these kinds of things are very dependent on the people that are in power. So if you have a person that has a voice within government that gets orange pilled, then it's very possible that those conversations could be happening. And we're seeing those kinds of things happen more and more. You've got Maya who's going to be running for president in Suriname on sort of like on a Bitcoin ticket. You've got Trump talking about Bitcoin. You've got Nayib Bukele. The UK's like sort of tried to Rishi Sunak was like trying to say that he was going to make London and the UK a crypto hub, but that was obviously all talk. But you had Ed Balls. I don't know if you saw this clip of Ed Balls and George Osborne in the UK. So they have a podcast. George Osborne was the Chancellor of the Exchequer under David Cameron in the Conservative government. And Ed Balls was the shadow chancellor, so the Labour Party, the opposition party chancellor. And they have a podcast together. I think it's called Political Currency, something like that. Anyway, there is a clip. If you scroll down my timeline a few days, I've retweeted, Mike Still found it, and I also tweeted it myself as well. But they were talking about Bitcoin, and they get it. They completely get it. They were saying like, the pound has no intrinsic value, because one Ed Bull said like, oh, it has no intrinsic value, and George Osborne said, well, yeah, pound coin also has no intrinsic value. If the UK government was to disappear tomorrow, the pound would be worthless. And they were saying how Bitcoin's likely here to stay because it's survived all these, survived like FTX and survived Mt. Gox, and it survived all this stuff. So it's kind of here to stay. So they get it. So yeah, I think it's just really dependent on the personalities that are in government and have they taken the time to study Bitcoin. And if so, then it's very likely that those conversations are happening. And I think we'll see more and more of them in the future. I like to say there's no informed Bitcoin bears. The only people who are Bitcoin bears haven't taken the time to study.
So did you see that clip this morning, data recording, Larry Fink talking with Jim Cramer, and Jim Cramer's like, yeah, thanks to you, I got Bitcoin and I understand Bitcoin now. And whether it's just blowing smoke up Larry Fink's ass or not, he came out really, really bullish. I'm not sure if he's put in the proof of work or not, but do you reckon the narrative actually is shifting as quick as that?
I mean, the narrative's always been the same, which is that, there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin and there's an infinite amount of fiat in the world. So Bitcoin is going to go up in fiat value forever until there's no more fiat and we just measure stuff in Bitcoin. Like we use Bitcoin as a unit of account. But I think just that information is distributing further and further out from like the core circle where it started with, on the Cypherpunk mailing list, and then on Bitcoin Talk forums, then on Reddit, then on Twitter, and now it's getting, the circle is getting bigger. The Bitcoin circle is getting bigger, and more people are falling into it. I don't think Jim Cramer definitely didn't get Bitcoin because of Larry Fink. He's just blowing smoke up his ass, because you can watch clips from 2021. He was on the Pomp podcast at least once, saying that Pomp was the one that got him to understand Bitcoin. And he even owned some and famously sold it to pay off his mortgage sometime in 2021.
Yeah. I want to sort of dive into, it looks like we could have a pretty big bull run, and 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. I get that, but a couple of people are going to make life-changing sums of fiat money. A quick message about today's sponsor, the Bitcoin Way. If you still have your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're using a hardware wallet that's not air-gapped, it's not open source, reach out to the Bitcoin Way. First 30 minutes, it's free. The team has over 25 years cybersecurity experience. They can help you take your Bitcoin into self-custody. Safety Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, endorses this team. They'll never touch your keys or your coins, but they'll empower you to become self-sovereign. They can teach you how to run a node, can assist with multi-sig, cybersecurity, inheritance planning, running VPNs, and so much more. And the team, they can even help you obtain a second passport. Bitcoin, it's generational wealth. Learn the skills today. I've put a link at the top of the description. And again, the first 30 minutes is free. So we'll come back to that, of selling potentially some of the Bitcoin to be able to buy lifestyle purchases or different quote unquote hard assets. But one thing, when I was doing the research for this video, I found very interesting is your eldest daughter, her first word was Bitcoin.
One of the first, yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Is that something that you taught her, or she just heard the conversations and that word over and over and over again?
I think I have like every Bitcoin children's book there is, and so those are on her bookshelf, and I'd point to this Bitcoin logo on one of them and say Bitcoin, and she just started saying it. I don't actually talk about Bitcoin that much in the house around my family and stuff, maybe with my wife a little bit sometimes, but it's not like I'm not banging on. I'm past the stage of like Bitcoin being the only thing I can talk about with anyone. That was probably like when I first got into it, and when I first really understood it in like 2020, 2021, that's when, you couldn't get me to shut up about it. Whereas now that's kind of gone away a little bit.
Yeah. For me, I haven't quite gotten there. It's definitely probably the first thing that I bring up with people starting a conversation, but then I will move out into different things depending on the heat or the warmth of the conversation. But Daniel, you got into Bitcoin 2019. You started working for Brains pretty early. You've worked for 3 different Bitcoin companies. You're doing your own thing now. What's your Bitcoin journey been like? You first heard about it in 2017. You started buying it 2019. Obviously, 2020 happened. 20K down to 3K, all the way up to $64,000. How's your rabbit hole journey been?
Yeah, it's funny. I studied, my degree was in economics of money, banking, and finance. This is like I've graduated in 2011, and I did my dissertation on silver. But I had actually, I looked at my email the other day. I bought silver from Kitco. I don't know if you know what Kitco is, but
of course,
it was like, so I bought some silver in like 2006 or 7 or something like that. And that's why I ended up like, I think I fell down some rabbit hole of like silver is going to be the same thing that silver bugs are still saying today. I think I fell for that like 15 years ago. Silver is going to the moon because of industrial uses, etc. So I should have been primed to like find Bitcoin and understand it from like an educational, well, given my education. But the first time I heard about it, I was immediately skeptical. I also think just most people don't explain it to you as money. So I just got told about Bitcoin in 2017. It was from someone, to be fair, I was a real estate agent. It was someone that was very successful. I was helping them find a home. And I was like, oh, this guy's got money, successful. He must know what he's talking about. So if he's talking about Bitcoin, I should look into it. And I probably Googled it and like read a BBC article that said it's, only used by criminals and whatever. And so I had the usual narratives, like it has no intrinsic value. It's open source software, so anyone can just copy it. Like it's digital. How can that? It's not physical. All the usual. It's a bubble. It's gone up from whatever it was, 300 to 2,000 or 3,000 that it was. I think it was around March 2017 when I remember first hearing about it. So I was immediately skeptical, but I kind of made a note to just keep an eye on it. And when the price crashed at the beginning of 2018, I was like, see, I was right. It was a bubble, blah, 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 blah. Not realizing that Bitcoin had already done this like a couple of times in the past and come back. So yeah, I was like, I'm super smart. Everyone else is stupid. Get on with my life. In 2019, I bought a real estate business and spent sort of a year. So, in 2019, when it shot back up to 10K, I was like, okay, it's gone back to halfway up the peak of the bubble. If it was just a bubble that pops, bubbles don't reinflate usually. It's like it fills up, pops, and then it dies. You look at every shitcoin chart. That's what a bubble looks like. But Bitcoin come back up. So I was like, okay, there must be something here that I'm missing because it's gone back up in price. So I bought some with the intention of thinking that if I have some skin in the game, I will take the time to learn about it. And it was around that time I was also in the process of buying a business. So I ended up buying that and spent the next year just focusing on turning it around. When COVID first happened was just when the business started making some money. So I was like looking at stocks to invest in, to put all the excess cash flows into. And I still had my Bitcoin. And I remember the crash, the COVID crash. And in my mind, I was like, this is the opportunity to like buy everything on the cheap. But I wasn't buying Bitcoin. I had my Bitcoin. I had it on Binance. I remember reading it crash to 3K. And I was like, I don't care because that's just staying there until I learn about it. But I wasn't like trying to buy more. I was like buying Spotify, Square, Tesla. Like I bought all those stocks before they all ran up massively. And then once and I was like individually picking stocks. I wasn't into like, I don't want to just like S&P 500 average. I was like, I can pick stocks better and moon. And of course, with that timing, I also thought I was a genius because everything went up. I bought Spotify just before they announced the Joe Rogan deal. That shot up massively. I think I bought some Square before they bought Bitcoin or just around the time they bought. Anyway, and then once I'd run out of like stocks that I wanted to buy, I was like, okay, now I need to find something else. And that's when I started to take a look back at Bitcoin and I started to buy some Bitcoin. And throughout 2020, I mean, I remember trying to buy half a Bitcoin when it was like 12K or something, and my credit card through Binance, because I was so new. I hadn't even set up like the banking link so I could send money there. And my credit card just kept getting rejected. So I ended up not being able to stack half a coin. And I was like, oh, whatever. But yeah, it was at the end of 2020 when the business was kind of up and running properly. And I actually went overseas for like 10 days. And that was the first time I kind of like stopped working and had some time to just focus on other things. And I started listening to some podcasts. Bitcoin was brought up. And that's when I started I watched on my way back, as I was living in Hong Kong at the time, on my way back into Hong Kong, I had to do a 14-day hotel quarantine. So in there is when I watched a Michael Saylor. I watched Michael Saylor on Pomp and Michael Saylor on Real Vision. And that's when I was like, I get it. And so I started selling. Those 14 days was just me selling everything I owned to buy Bitcoin at the end of 2020. So and that's when it clicked.
Nice. And since then, because the price was obviously a lot cheaper then, are you still buying Bitcoin now, or how's your Bitcoin accumulation strategy going? You just bought it, you're holding, or you're still DCA? Or
yeah, so I bought all the way up to the top of 2021 and then all the way back down again. I was buying remember we peaked at like 64K and then down. I was still buying that whole time. I was still buying throughout 2022. 2023, and then I left Brains at the end of last year, so I have no income at the moment. So there's not been a lot of stacking going on at the moment. It's been more selling.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll dive into the sell side of things soon, but being in Bitcoin only since like 2019, really getting it about 2020, then working for Brains and then, 3 different Bitcoin companies in general. How do you get into the Bitcoin ecosystem so early? And what's that side of things been like? Because there's going to be so many people watching this video that love Bitcoin. Bitcoin's changing their life. They want to be able to get involved in maybe a deeper, more profound way. I think your story may be able to shed a little bit of light how that's possible, how you went about it, maybe a little beacon of light.
Yeah, I'll tell you how I did it. So just backing up a little bit, in 2016, I had my own real estate brokerage. It was just me. I ended up hiring my mum, but I was trying to make a website and watching some WordPress tutorials. And that's when I got a little bit of like, oh, I need to like learn to code to make a website. And basically around that time is I realized my job, which was working as a Hong Kong residential real estate broker, very, very much requires me to be physically in a bunch of places, like to do appointments. And also I'm location dependent on Hong Kong. Like I'm becoming a specialist in the Hong Kong real estate market. So I can't, I can't scale most of my job using media or code, right? I still have to go to appointments. I still have to go see apartments. And I discovered this whole world of like internet business, that you could just do business with like a website selling information or selling products online. And that was a lot more scalable than doing what I was doing. And it was also something that you could do from anywhere in the world. So I was like, if I ever want to leave Hong Kong, I'm pretty much screwed if my, if I'm a specialist in Hong Kong real estate. So that was like a little seed that was planted in my head then. And sort of before I bought my real estate business was when I was like thinking, okay, I really want to transition out of doing real estate and into some sort of internet business. I didn't know what. I just wanted to do either use code or media on the internet to do business. But obviously the opportunity came up to buy this business and I couldn't say no. It was too good. It was like, I can apply my knowledge, but at least with the business, I could leverage other people's labor so that I could free up my own time. Right.
Yeah.
So essentially that's what allowed me, when I discovered Bitcoin, to go all in on it. Right. It was because I'd found a way to free up my own time and to divorce my time from my earnings. So for people who are working a job, I would say the first step is like find a way to get more time. I get it. I'm so bad at working a full-time gig and then doing like a side hustle, waking up at 4 a.m. to work, or I can't do that. So if I was when I'm working a full-time gig, like at the end of the day, I'm fried. I don't have the energy to do anything else. So for me personally, it's like find a way to free up your time. For other people, they might be able to wake up at 4 a.m. and do 3 hours in the morning or whatever. Then the other key for me was starting a Twitter account. And by the way, so when I got into Bitcoin, I was in the process of exiting my business as well.
Yeah.
Long story short, I got into a disagreement with my business partner. And so at the time that disagreement started was when I started getting into Bitcoin. So I was essentially kind of out. I owned the business, but I was like not taking part in the operations anymore. And so I was in the process of leaving Hong Kong. So this is like from January 2021. I opened my account in February 2021. But I would say is get on Twitter. Twitter is the greatest way to network and to like join a community. So I'm sure that everyone listening to this is already on Twitter, but I would just make sure that you're not just lurking. Go on there, tweet multiple times a day, go find accounts that are big in the Bitcoin space. And when they tweet, try and think of a thoughtful reply and reply under those tweets. Try and see how you can add value. There's a guy, I think his Twitter name is Bitcoin Overflow. So I followed him and he DM'd me saying, thanks for the follow. And then I saw that when MicroStrategy announced that they were paying back some of their outstanding debt and issuing new debt, there was some confusion about the terms or whatever. And I think he's in finance. So he did a post just explaining what MicroStrategy was doing. That got something like 500 likes. He had like 1,000 or 500 followers or 1,000 followers, and I think he shot up by like 500 followers just off that tweet. So try and like provide value. There are proven methods to create content that make it valuable for other people. So that's how you're going to grow your Twitter account. You're going to grow your network. And that's how I ended up working at Brains. Is I just obsessed about Bitcoin and then tweeted everything I was learning or thinking about Bitcoin. Literally verbal diarrhea. Don't worry about the quality. At first, it's like a volume game, right? Because you also don't know what's going to hit with people, what's going to be useful and what's not. And the only way you learn is like repetitions, volume. And the great thing about Twitter is the feedback loop is so fast. If you tweet something and it gets very little likes, it's because no one cares. Like people say the algo. I even do this sometimes. The algo doesn't learn, whatever. No, you just it's not hitting, right? Recently, since I changed my Twitter name from Gandalf to my real name, I was like, oh, definitely engagement is down, blah, 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 blah. And then I tweeted the German meme and that blew up. So, the algo just wants to give people content that they'll consume. But yeah, so find ways to give people value, whatever in whatever profession you're in. So this Bitcoin overflow guy was in finance. So he used that to explain the MicroStrategy stuff. That was very valuable to people because it's kind of a news thing and people were confused. So he gave clarity on something that was like a current event. And Twitter is very much about current events, right? It's very news driven. Everyone's always talking about the latest thing. Like last week, it was Germany selling Bitcoin. This week, it's like Trump assassination. Soon it'll be like Michael Dell bought Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So get on Twitter, provide value, get in there, engage with people, reply to accounts that are tweeting in your niche, in this case, Bitcoin. And yeah, that's how I got my gig at Brains. I was willing also to start from scratch again. So I went from like 8 years of experience in real estate, owning a business, to literally I got a job as a social media intern at Brains.
Yep.
Getting paid like $20 an hour, working part-time a few hours a week. But yeah, I did it. The way I got the job is so I started interviewing with them. I think they were impressed. I had like maybe 2,000-3,000 followers that I had built up in like 3 months or 4 months. So they're like, wow, that's pretty good. And then I think because I was plugged in, I saw Max and Stacy tweeted that they wanted to, something happened with mining. And they said, oh, we want to interview someone in the mining space. Who should we interview? And I replied under that tweet and said, you should interview Jan and Pavel, who are the founders of Brains. And then they ended up going on the podcast because of that tweet. And then I used that in my interview. I was like, look, I got you. Yeah, I was the one that replied to that tweet and got Jan and Pavel on the podcast. And so that there were other candidates, but obviously that was part of why they hired me.
That's super high signal. A couple of takeaways there. It's not the algorithm that is not pushing out people's content. It's people don't like what you have to say. Reiterate the good thing about Twitter is you can put out 100 tweets a day if you want to, or 100 posts on X, and make sure that you are providing value to people. I want to go back a little bit. When you're living in Hong Kong, a couple of questions. When I see videos of Hong Kong, it looks very tech focused. It looks like a beautiful city, and I've heard really good things about that. They seem to be a proxy for China, or like a second China almost. The Hong Kong has the ETF. What was like the Bitcoin adoption, or do you follow it anymore over there since you have moved from Hong Kong now? And do you think Hong Kong and China are going to have any real impact on the Bitcoin market this cycle? There are rumors that mainland China may unban Bitcoin Q4 this year. They're just rumors. The source is Twitter.
No, the source, it literally says source reports.
Yeah. But how do you think the Hong Kong China story is going to play out? But even before that, like, what was Hong Kong like as a place to live and to be able to be and sell real estate and be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so a little bit of context about Hong Kong, just so people know. Hong Kong belonged to China in pre-1898 or whatever it was. and then it was leased to the Brits for 100 or 99-year lease or 100-year lease. It was to do with the resolution of the Opium Wars. So Hong Kong was a British colony for 100 years. In 1997, it was handed back to China per the agreement that they signed 100 years before. And so China promised that Hong Kong would maintain its sort of like independence and its like specific rule of law that is different to China for at least 50 years until 2047. At one point, there was promise from China that Hong Kong would be able to elect its own chief executive, which is like the president of Hong Kong. They then reneged on that promise. That started what you might have seen, the umbrella revolution. Yellow umbrellas was like the symbol of it. This is in 2014. That movement got quashed. And then in 2019, China tried to introduce a national security law, which basically meant that you could get arrested for saying bad things about China or like cessation and all that stuff, treason. And before that, you could speak freely about politics and about China and Hong Kong because China and Hong Kong did not have an extradition treaty. So you could say something about China and not be extradited to China. But now it made this national security law made it a crime to commit treason or cessation or what, to say Hong Kong's independent of China. Any of those sort of messages became illegal, and you could be arrested in Hong Kong and extradited to China. So there was a big revolt about that. And that's where Hong Kong is kind of now. These protests, there was basically a massive, sort of like almost civil war, but it was just like months and months of riots. So the Hong Kong people rioting and standing up against this new national security law, which has been implemented, and things have sort of gone back to normal, but a lot of people have left. But yeah, Hong Kong is amazing. It's an incredible. I lived there for 25 years. I grew up there. I moved there when I was 8 years old, and I left when I was 33 or something like that, 34. So incredible city. I would love to go back one day. It's like concrete jungle, nature, beaches. It's got the best of everything. Like here in Dubai, there's I want to say there's no nature, but it's like it's desert nature. So it's a lot of sand, and then it's like concrete jungle in the middle of the city. They've done a lot to green it up, but Hong Kong has like 70% of Hong Kong is national parks. There's mountains. You can go hiking. You can go swimming. Cool. Yeah, so it's amazing. I would highly recommend anyone to go at least visit. And I grew up there. I think it's an amazing place to live. In terms of Bitcoin, so Hong Kong's been one of these places that is a very tax-friendly jurisdiction. So very low income tax rates, very low corporate tax rates, super easy to set up a company. Like the actual, administrative process of setting up a company is super, super easy. And there's no capital gains tax. So that's obviously makes going there and investing in stuff, anything that's like a capital gain nature type of activity, makes it very attractive to do it in Hong Kong. And it was actually a shock to me to move. I moved to the UK in 2021. It was a shock. And just after I got into Bitcoin properly, it was a shock that wow, taxes are super high everywhere else in the world. I never really thought about it. I was just used to Hong Kong. Hong Kong has a big history. Hong Kong played a big part in Bitcoin's history. So FTX used to be headquartered in Hong Kong. Alameda Research was headquartered in Hong Kong before FTX moved to the Bahamas. I had a friend who was in a serviced office where FTX had their office in like a Regis office center, right? And they had like a bodyguard outside. My mate worked in an office in there as well. So they were around. BitMEX famously took up an office in the same building as Goldman Sachs and Bloomberg. Higher floor, they put in a fish tank with sharks in there just to flex to tradfi, cryptos here. I think Bitfinex, the 2016 Bitfinex hack with Razzle Khan.
Yeah.
Allegedly was like a social engineering
crocodile of Wall Street.
that happened. So Razzle Khan and her husband lived in Hong Kong at the time, and the social engineering allegedly that took place to steal that Bitcoin, what happened in Hong Kong. Arthur Hayes was a trader in Hong Kong for Deutsche Bank before he started BitMEX in Hong Kong. There was during the block size wars, there was the Scaling Bitcoin conference in Hong Kong. So there's been a bunch of stuff that's happened in Hong Kong, presumably because it's kind of like Hong Kong's always made top rankings in terms of like financial freedom, in terms of like how easy it is to just do business and trade there. That obviously lends itself to Bitcoin and crypto. And there's so a guy called Leo Weiss started he's one of the founders of the Bitcoin Foundation in Hong Kong, and they also did an advertising campaign where they made Bitcoin livery for a tram. So a tram that just like goes around, passenger tram that goes around Hong Kong had Bitcoin logos all over it. I think it said "Be Your Own Bank," and then they also sort of rented the advertising space on the tram stop right outside HSBC headquarters in Hong Kong. It's a very famous like place, and there's loads of cool shots from this park behind it with the tram advertising. It's like Bitcoin, be your own bank, and then in the background is the
Nice.
HSBC main building. So yeah, if you want to do Bitcoin stuff, there's no cap gains. It's super easy to start a business. It's a great place to live. It's just like obscenely expensive real estate.
Okay.
Yeah. Like,
I wonder if they're more expensive than Australia. Like, it's pretty bad here, and our taxes are through the roof. I wonder how that would compare.
I mean, I used to pay like 3,000 US for a 600 square foot 2-bedroom place in like a super old building facing my windows faced a car park and a wall. It was a good location, and it was a decent size, 600 square foot for a 2-bedroom. That was a decent size for Hong Kong. But that was about it. So it's expensive. I mean, like to get a 30 or 40 square meters, 300 to 400 square foot 1-bedroom place in a not fancy building or in the center of Hong Kong or anywhere central is going to cost you like $1 million US.
Yeah, right. It's probably comparable to Sydney. Probably like the city centre in Sydney. I don't live there, and nor am I interested in living in Sydney of all places. But our tax rate here is pretty much 50%. Give or take a couple of percentage. So it probably does pay to be able to shop around and potentially look at getting a second passport. But then why make the shift to Dubai? It sounds like you really enjoyed Hong Kong. Taxes were good, capital gains and stuff were very favorable. Why make that move?
Yeah, so I had this business, and it was a good living, but in Hong Kong it was an okay living in Hong Kong, but we thought if we move to Europe, the money that the business makes in Europe will go way further. Even with the extra taxes, it will go way further. You can live way better. And I wanted to have the time as well to shift over into starting some sort of I thought I was going to learn to code. I was like, in Europe, we can live off this money way better than in Hong Kong. My wife was pregnant. We're going to have our first daughter. And my wife's family all lives over in Europe. So we decided to make the move. After 25 years, for my wife, it was like going home. And for me, it was like, okay, 25 years done in Hong Kong. I had loads of friends there, all my lifelong friends were there. And it was very distracting. There's always some social event, someone's birthday, people are meeting up for beers. And I also felt like that was getting in the way, to start something again from scratch. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, right? Yeah. With real estate, I was coasting. But to go into something as a newbie, you have to invest a shit ton of time to build the skills, to build the knowledge. And so I felt like if I just left and went somewhere where I know no one, then I can just obsess about the new thing that I want to do. Those were the reasons for moving. But we decided it before I got into Bitcoin. So literally it was like maybe July 2020 that we decided we're going to move the following year. And it was like December 2020 where I got into Bitcoin, and then February 2021 when I opened the Twitter account. So it was all already like the plan was already in motion. So when we got to the UK, I think even before we left Hong Kong, I was already saying to my wife that we should move to the Isle of Man instead of the UK. Because the Isle of Man is it's a British Crown dependency. It's a little island between the UK and Ireland, but it has much friendlier tax laws. So there's no capital gains tax there. It's sort of like Hong Kong in terms of taxes. So we did end up moving there eventually. before I moved to Dubai.
I did see a little video. You're in a raincoat and you're saying like summer in Isle of Man or something. I saw that before we went live.
Yeah, so Isle of Man was kind of like it's kind of like it is like the UK in terms of weather, lifestyle, but obviously a much friendlier tax jurisdiction. So being in Bitcoin, I just felt that was a better place to be. And I ended up doing a short contract, some contract work for Coin Corner, which is an exchange there. But ultimately, my wife, I mean, I agree with her, but it was very quiet. So we just kind of we struggled with that. We wanted to go back to somewhere that's a bit more cosmopolitan. We live really far outside of the main Dubai city. So we live as far away as you can, but still, you get in a car half an hour. In half an hour, you have the city, but we're outside. We don't have to deal with like the traffic and all the people and the smog and whatever. Well, there's still smog, but we don't have to deal at least with the traffic.
Yeah. No, that's nice. Let's flip the script a little bit. Elon Musk said Tesla is going to start accepting Bitcoin once it hits 50% renewable energy. Firstly, we're at about 56% now, and he hasn't really said anything. He's been so silent on this. But do you reckon he came out in support of Trump 100%? He said, I fully endorse President Trump. Trump's obviously coming out with the Bitcoin agenda. Whether it's for votes, he actually does it. I think there's good things happening on that front. Do you reckon this could be the cycle where Elon Musk says, okay, sorry about last time, sorry to crash the market, sorry to talk about Doge and pump and dump on you. It's Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the thing. He's getting all these money licenses in the States happening. Do you think it's a very real possibility or still highly unlikely?
I mean, from everything I've seen from him recently about Bitcoin, I mean, he had, is it a Twitter space or something recently where somebody tried to start talking to him about Bitcoin, or is something that he does with Kathy Wood, some like fireside chat. Maybe it was even Preston.
I think that Kathy Wood was definitely there. Maybe Preston Pish.
Yeah,
there's another
Preston
big player.
pushed him on it. Yeah, Preston pushed him on it, and he was like, "Look, if we're going to talk about Bitcoin, I'm just going to log off because I'm not interested." So I don't think he really cares. I think Bitcoin, people only care about Bitcoin when it aligns with their interests. So if Elon Musk can see some benefit of supporting Bitcoin again, then he will, and if he doesn't, he probably won't. The guy is doing so many things, running 3 or 4 companies or whatever he does. Twitter. I mean, anything to do with finance on Twitter, I think is going to be more of like a medium of exchange thing. So people can like basically buy stuff off each other or tip each other. That's the only way I see it going. So not sure that he's going to think Bitcoin is the best thing for that, even though the Lightning Network would do just great, as we see on Nostr. He seems like the kind of guy that it's like Trump. I think like Trump's more likely to make Trump coin legal tender in the US than Bitcoin, but who knows?
Yep. So what are your thoughts on Trump? The events over the weekend, absolutely shocking. Those shots were heard around the world, but he was dead set against it. It looked like Vivek Ramaswamy got into Trump's ear and said, you need to start talking about this Bitcoin thing. He tried it out, got some really good reactions, tried it again, got even better reactions, and he sort of just run with it. It looks like his VP's been in Bitcoin for a couple of years now. Do you think maybe not making it legal tender, but is there like a possibility that he gets in? Like very often we see politicians everywhere around the world, they'll make all these campaign promises, but then once they actually succeed, they'll renege on them, or they'll take them back and say, oh, we didn't have all the information, we couldn't do this, or they'll just sort of put that on the back burner. Oh, we need to sort out this first before we can do this. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The politician reneging on his campaign promise is a tale as old as time. Like in the UK, the Conservatives are supposed to be the low tax, pro business friendly party, and I think UK taxes were the highest they've ever been since World War II. So I don't, he can say all this stuff, and I think it's good. It's obviously a symbol that awareness around Bitcoin is growing, that there's so many people that are pro Bitcoin that speaking positively about it he feels like it's worth doing because it'll impact his chances of becoming president. I think that part is significant. Whether or not he puts Bitcoin on the balance sheet or whatever, obviously that would be, but I'm not holding my breath. It would be significant if he did it. But yeah, I just think right now all we know is that he's talking about it, and that it's likely he's doing so because he thinks it's good for his chances, and that's significant for Bitcoin. That's a step up from it's only used by criminals and or it's being ignored or whatever, right?
Yeah, 100%.
They're like they're not. Certain people are past the stage of fighting it. Like they're in the join them. If you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is why I say about the people will support Bitcoin if it aligns with their incentives. For Trump, it's like it's the opposite of Biden, so it helps him in to take everyone who is not pro Biden because he's anti Bitcoin.
Flipping back and talking about Trump, nothing is done until it's done, in the words of Michael Dunworth. But you put out a really epic post, a tweet, and I urge everyone to follow Daniel. I've put Bitcoin Gandalf, your link below. But the election years have been good during Bitcoin's history. 2012, 184% return. 2016, 132. 2020, 270. And so far, we're about 35%-ish. What happens when we get rate cuts? It looks like a 90% chance in September. Again, it's not done until it's done. But that is sort of leading up into where the election cycle is really going to start heating up. If rate cuts come down, maybe they start firing up the money printer. Do you reckon we're in for another good like Q4 and then going out into next year? Or how do you sort of see the end of this cycle if we're to stick to the 4-year cycles playing out?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think Trump walking the talk would be a big deal. If I don't think he's going to buy Bitcoin for the U.S. Treasury balance sheet. But let's say he did that. That would be huge, I think. But it's funny because sometimes Bitcoin just doesn't react to a bunch of bullish news, and sometimes it goes parabolic. So it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. But yeah, I think that would be big. I mean, the 35% year to date now is probably more like 50% year to date, given because I think I did that when Germany was dumping. So, we've already seen a shift up from, if you bought at 53K, you're up 10 grand on a Bitcoin already. So Bitcoin has these big moves. Yeah, I think Trump walking the talk would be a big pump. Another billionaire adopting Bitcoin and being very vocal about it. I don't think anyone is ever going to be as vocal as Michael Saylor, because he's literally made it his full-time job to go on every podcast possible in the world and every news show and tweet and, try and get other companies buying Bitcoin as well. But if we got like a Michael Dell and he was very public about it, you could see a pump there. It just has to be that, to make it sustainable, there has to be actual demand that is hodler demand. We have to build a new base of hodlers, not just people who come in because Elon Musk bought and then they sell because Elon Musk says it's bad now. Like, those aren't the kind of people that are going to keep the price high and, build the next level in terms of price support. But yeah, it's interesting because the 4-year cycle matches, election years. And so that's why in an election year, it does so well, because it is also matching the 4-year cycle. I think it does even better in the year after elections. I think that's when it I actually might tweet this today. The year after elections is like when the price really pumps.
Yeah.
This is just the warm up.
I feel like it is, and I think 2025 is going to be absolutely spectacular for a lot of people. So I guess I alluded to it at the start. You haven't been earning fiat, so you have been using your Bitcoin holdings for lifestyle to be able to survive, using it as a store of value, and then in a time when you need it. What are your thoughts in regards to buying Bitcoin, saving in Bitcoin, and then spending Bitcoin, or do you just hodl it forever? Or what's the way that you're approaching Bitcoin within your own personal life, Daniel?
Yeah, just look at it as money, right? Would you spend $1? Yeah. So I'd spend some Bitcoin. That's what money is for: acquiring goods and services, or for selling goods and services and acquiring money in exchange for it. So there's no, I get it. I get, like, if you live in the US and you earn dollars and selling Bitcoin, it's a capital gains event, then I get it that you just buy and hodl, right? But if you live somewhere where you could use Bitcoin and fiat interchangeably, I always try to use Bitcoin if I can, just because I think it helps the adoption of Bitcoin, right? You want to incentivize the people who offer you the chance to pay them in Bitcoin with doing it. That's how they're going to push for it more, right? If you go to a place that takes Bitcoin and you pay in dollars, you're disincentivizing them to try and keep going with Bitcoin. At Coin Corner, they in the Isle of Man, so they set up a lot of local businesses with the ability to receive Bitcoin payments for their goods and services in store. And because so few people used it, you'd go and try and pay with Bitcoin, and like their Bitcoin POS was off, or their staff didn't know how to use it, or didn't even know they had it. That's just a case of like, it's no demand. So I like to use it. I'm not the kind of person that's like, do not sell your Bitcoin. Why would you ever sell your Bitcoin? Again, it's contextual. So I get the people that do that because they have to pay tax, capital gains or whatever, but I don't think that should be a blanket rule for everyone.
Yeah. I agree. And I sort of changed the way sort of that I think about it. Like I got like this deep cold storage stack that I don't know will ever see the light of day. Another one that's pretty much as deep, but I keep telling myself I'll give myself permission to be able to use that. And then I'll load up my Lightning wallet. And say, like with my thumbnail guy, he reached out to me, YouTube comment section, said, hey, bro, I'd like to do your thumbnails. I'm like, talk to me on Twitter. Go over to Twitter, start talking. I said, that's great. That'd be cool. That'd be a lot of help, but I'm only paying in Bitcoin. He's like, oh, no, can't you use like PayPal or something? I'm like, I could, but I'm not going to. Like, I got a Bitcoin channel. I talk about Bitcoin. I don't like holding fiat at all. As soon as I get fiat, I convert into one of those 3 buckets. I said, I'd love you to come on. I'd love you to help me. I need the help with this. And, slowly orange pilling, and he's really getting it now, which is really rewarding. He'll like send me invoices. He's like, oh, how much for? I'm like, go work it out. Work out how many Satoshis, the 5 thumbnails for 10 thumbnails and stuff. And he keeps asking me like better and better questions every single day, just from pushing him that there's no option. He either worked with me and he accepted Bitcoin, or he didn't work with me and he can take fiat elsewhere. But by doing that, he's a young kid. He's under 20 years old. I said, whether you hold on to the Bitcoin, that's up to you. It's your choice. Do whatever you want with it. But at least understand what this thing is now, because you're going to be working for the rest of your life. When you're having conversations now with people in regards to Bitcoin, you said it's not like all that you talk about, but how are you approaching like those orange pill conversations? Is it just, hey, download a Lightning wallet, let me send you a little bit, see how fast it is, this is the hardest money, or what's that look like?
Yes, so I don't really have them. To be honest, I don't interact with a lot of human beings in person. I see my family. That's pretty, and I go to, and my only socializing is going to a Bitcoin meetup.
Sounds like me, man.
So I don't really talk to it. I'm not like, if you in your scenario with the video editor, if I really liked him, I would have just probably been like, do you accept Bitcoin? If he said no, I'd be like, all right, I'll pay in fiat. I wouldn't have like tried to do the whole but when I used to do it, it was my main method for trying to like get my friends into Bitcoin. Well, one was I was like just talking about it all the time because I was obsessed, and the price was pumping, so that really helps. Like the number go up is the biggest driver of adoption ever. But it would be like if we went to if we had beers, if my football team had beers, someone would pay for it, and I'd say, hey, I'll pay you back in Bitcoin. Right. Yeah. And that's how I got a lot of people. Or I just offered, literally at one point, I think I just sent everyone like $5 of Bitcoin, which is a waste because they just, probably lose it. They probably delete the blue wallet off their phone and lose the Bitcoin. So I don't think giving it away for free helps. This is a concept also in like business and like people value something if they have to pay for it.
Yeah.
If it costs them something, right? Yeah. If it costs them something, then they're going to value it more than if they just get it for free. So giving away Bitcoin for free, I don't think is necessarily a great strategy.
I filmed a documentary when I was in the States last year, and Wallet of Satoshi was still available. And so I went around, I'm like, hey, can I give you some free Bitcoin and just like record like a couple of sound bites, tell you about it. And I needed to ask over 100 people to find 5 people to be able to give Bitcoin away to. And it was like $60 to $100 or something at that stage, that those 5 people ended up getting. Maybe it's a little bit more. It's probably like at the $100 end. And that'd be worth a lot more now. It would have been around the lows. I think it was like 23,000, whatever it was at that stage. So it's probably up, 300% since then. But Wallet of Satoshi got taken off the App Store in the States, so that Bitcoin is donated to the network for forever. But those people that got given the Bitcoin for free, I also gave them the book Beers for Bitcoin. Shout out to Dasby and Seb Bunny. Maybe some of them read it, but maybe from doing that and that wallet just being taken away, and they're watching it grow, and they got taken away. They're like, see, my first savings, it's a scam. It can all be taken away, just this magic internet money. So I'm not so sure how well it works. But what I have seen work very effectively is having the orange pill conversations, and people like, oh, it's so slow. I promise you it's not. And then you get them to download and just even send them like a couple of cents worth, not a high thing, but just to show them how fast Lightning is, has been, quite a big deal. That's one great Bitcoin book. I'm a big advocate of either reading the books or eating the bugs. Are you a reader yourself, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm more of a listener of podcasts, but I do read a lot too.
Is there like a single book? It doesn't need to be related to Bitcoin, but like, is there an outstanding book that you've listened to or you've read that's really stuck with you, through your life, maybe as an entrepreneur or someone diving down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, that you'd recommend everyone should just pick up and read?
Oh man, there's been so many. Like, my mom gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 14, and that literally changed my life, because that's the reason why I've always tried to do my own thing, start businesses and stuff like that. And understood the concept of investing from an early age. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, when I was very young, it's very basic. It's very high level. There's nothing really tactical about it. It's like, invest in stocks. Okay, great. Like, which ones? How do I know which ones? Buy real estate. But yeah, in terms of a bigger picture, that's great. I was obsessed with Warren Buffett from ages like 15, 16 until like 18, 19. So that's when I got more technical, like studying value investing and stuff like that. Understanding finances, like being able to read a P&L, a profit and loss, and a balance sheet, I think is just a very useful skill to have, and it applies to so much. So I studied a lot of Warren Buffett. And then lately, I really like the Lessons of History. I think so if you go and read the Lessons of History, is a very short book. It's less than 200 pages. And the authors of it previously wrote an 11-book series called The History of Civilization or something like that.
Yep.
But they're like fat books, like 1,000 pages each one. And then they endeavored to summarize those 11 huge books into one tiny book. And so it's beautifully, like, it's the most value per word book I've ever read, because it takes so much wisdom, knowledge, and information from history and condenses it down to this tiny book. So it's like the sentences are so well constructed because they have to be. Like, there's no fluff in it at all. And then you also realize that history just repeats constantly. We think we're like, people come in with these like political ideologies that we're going to get rid of inequality and everyone's going to be rich and whatever. And that's like, you see this happen time and time again in history. Like, inequality is baked into our very existence, right? There is no such thing as equality. Even, in nature, the like alpha lion shags all the bitches and eats all the meat, right? And the other ones die. And so it gives you perspective, and it makes you realize that people who are like, today we think we have all these ideas on how we're going to fix the world and how we're going to change things forever, and we're not. It's just a cycle, and it just keeps going and going and going.
This is actually a conversation my wife and I have fairly frequently in the household. That mean Bitcoin fixes this, fix the money, fix the world. And my wife will say, not everyone can afford a Bitcoin or 0.1 Bitcoin, or some people are too busy with their lives to even be able to take the time to be able to study it. Bitcoin's not fair. It's just the same thing. And in one part, like, I agree with her, is the people that have the time to be able to think. When you spent 14 days in isolation, you had the time to be able to go down rabbit holes and sell your stock and then move towards Bitcoin. Like, that does come from a privileged place. So people are always going to have an unfair advantage. I guess with Bitcoin, nobody can control it. Everyone's equal. Nobody's gate kept out of it, aside from banks, like on and off ramps with that. And there's nobody can manipulate it. So it's fair on that front. But the billionaires, the current billionaires of the world, the quintillionaires, they do have an unfair advantage. They're closest to the money printer. They can buy more Bitcoin. I guess I just feel like because they're so ingratiated or ingrained within the fiat system, they're not really looking. So we've got an unfair advantage that maybe we've got the time, the resources to be able to host and create an account called Bitcoin Gandalf, and then work in Bitcoin for Bitcoin and be able to understand what this is and be here at an earlier age. For people, like, when I first heard about Bitcoin as $94 Australian, started buying about $30,000. Like, was that unfair? No, like, everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. Being in a first world country in Australia, more discretionary income, I can buy more Bitcoin than somebody else that has more time but less fiat. But at least there's no one that's got control over it. That's the way I see it. So I do think Bitcoin is fair. But what are your thoughts of it? Is it just the same system, just moving to a different demographic, like a new elite? Or, like, is anything going to change? Is Bitcoin actually going to fix this?
I mean, Bitcoin's not going to change the fact that we aren't all equal. And, like, I think that inequality as a result of, like, the free market and meritocracy is fair, right? Why should the person that just sat there watching Netflix and, eating chips and not doing anything with their life have the same outcome as someone who's taken the time to study information that's useful for them to be a valuable member of society, to provide value from, essentially how you make money is that you provide value to others. You solve someone else's problem and they give you money in return, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is what we want, right? We want that to happen. We don't want money to go to the people who are not providing value to society, who are not being helpful, who are not being accretive. So I would say that's fair. That it's not unfair. But there are also, like, life circumstantial things that happen that, like, if your parents are crack addicts and they didn't give you the rich dad, poor dad, and you grew up somewhere where that wasn't even mentioned, and it was before the internet and all this stuff, that's circumstantial and that is unfair, right? But it's part of life. It happens. And sure, we can take steps to mitigate it by trying to, give people more access to information, give them more opportunities, but you can only take people so far. You can only do so much. At some point, the person has to take personal responsibility. They have to go out, they have to consume the information, they have to apply the information, they have to go and do it for themselves. You're not going to save someone else, in the sense that, like, it's the typical, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So we can do as much as possible to lead all the horses to the water. But at the end of the day, there are going to be some horses that are not going to drink, right?
Yep.
And those horses will die of thirst, right? Dehydration. And there will be others that don't. And that's just part of life. And it sucks. Like, some of those events are really sad. And people that probably had potential didn't achieve it because of circumstances. They got cancer and died. They had to look after a mother. They had to do whatever, right? That's that's part of living, that's part of life, that's part of being a human being existing on this earth. Now, Bitcoin makes things, I think, I wouldn't say Bitcoin is fair, but Bitcoin, because the world, like I just said, like the world, it exists in the world and things happen in the world that are not fair. But Bitcoin is fairer than the current system that we have, principally because it can't be stolen from you via debasement. Like inflation and money printing is the most like insidious way. It is literal theft of your purchasing power. After, it's like getting a pay cut after you've earned the money.
Yeah.
Like, think about that concept, right? It's like you agree to do a job for $100 because you, in your head, you know, $100 buys me this much goods and services. Like I can pay my groceries. I can buy groceries for a week with $100, or I can pay like some portion of my rent. And then after you've earned the money, that money no longer buys you what it did before when you agreed to do work for that money. Like if we just switch over, if we switch the unit of account from the fiat currency dollars or whatever, and you think about it in terms of what goods and services that money gets you, then that's when you realize like they are literally stealing from you after you've earned the money.
Yeah, by design. They're even talking about here changing the target inflation rate from 2% to 4% because it won't have a meaningful impact. I think people lose about 36% over 10 years after it's compounded. But last question, Daniel, what are you most bullish on? We've covered a lot in this podcast. We'll have to get you back on for a live. Everyone, make sure you do follow Daniel at Bitcoin Gandalf. I've put your link below there. But what are you most bullish on? There's so many things happening. Where is your focus at the minute?
I'm bullish on the internet. I just think the internet is the greatest thing ever. Bitcoin exists partly because of the internet. Like, look at Bitcoin flourished out of an internet community, right? It was a bunch of people. The internet allows you to find your I hate the word tribe, but like it allows you to
like the word tribe.
You like it? Cool. I feel like it's like very much people trying to sell you like to join their community or whatever. But I'm very much like in this world. So maybe that's why I have that connotation. But yeah, Bitcoin allows you, the internet allows you to find the people that are like you, connect with them, share your knowledge, like enjoy your common interests. When I was growing up, like my friends weren't into Warren Buffett when they were 16. So I didn't talk to anyone about Warren. I was obsessed with drumming, and I found a forum online that was like all people who are drummers. And that's where it was like Twitter. It was literally like Twitter for drumming. So I'd already experienced this like internet community. I love that. I love that the internet gives you access to literally anything you want to learn, right?
Yeah.
You can find the information. And if you want to learn it directly from people, the internet destroys, like, for example, I think in education, you no longer have to suffer through a bad teacher. The best teachers of any topic will take the majority of students into their ecosystem, right? Because now you don't have, your local math teacher at your local school doesn't have to affect your learning maths, because you could just go on the internet and find probably the Albert Einstein or whoever the best mathematician in the world is right now. They're probably going to realize, like, I can impact a lot more people and make a lot more money teaching on the internet because my audience is everyone in the world, versus if I was just like, teacher in some small Arkansas town or wherever, like small town, right, where I'm only teaching like 30 students a year. So I'm super bullish on the internet and Bitcoin as an extension of that, because I think, there's like the freedom of speech or freedom to know information. Like the printing press changed everything because it allowed like the disbursement of information. And that's what the internet is, like a super advanced version of the printing press. And then Bitcoin changes everything on the money front, and money is what allows us to buy back our time. So bullish on those two things. I guess the stereotypical answer, I should have said something about AI or whatever. But I think just still the foundations, right? Money, information, internet, Bitcoin.
Yeah, and actually, I've been using AI a lot lately, and I'm pretty bullish. I don't think it's going to be as big, like the singularity. I don't know if we're going to see any of that. I think that's a bit of nonsense. But as a tool, it's just another tool on the internet that you can use to help your journey on the internet, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think Bitcoin and AI will come together in some very meaningful ways over the next few years, but I think that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, on the AGI thing, I think like we don't really even understand how our brains work fully. So how are we going to recreate, unless we do it by accident, like we create AGI by accident? If it's not going to be by design, if you can't recreate a human brain. So yeah, but we'll see. I agree. It's a tool. It's like going from a typewriter to a computer. It's like, any other technological leap. It's going to be great. It's going to increase productivity. It's going to obsolete people that do a mediocre job at a bunch of stuff. And it's exciting too, but the internet is the foundation of everything.
Daniel, this was so fun. For everyone watching, follow Daniel, hit subscribe if we vibe, leave a comment, and we'll both get back to you on that. But let's do this again soon, hey?
Would love to. Thank you very much for having me.